Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Sophie Cadigan and I'm the Communications Manager at the BCI Media Group, and I'm the host of these webinars. We will get started in just a moment. We're just waiting on a few more people to join in the webinar today, so bear with us. We'll be with you very, very soon. Okay, thank you everyone for joining me today. If you've just tuned in, my name is Sophie Cadigan and I'm the Communications Manager at the BCI Media Group, and I'm the host of these webinars. You can contact me directly at s.cadigan@bcimediagroup.com. Okay. Before we get started today, we are recording this webinar and it will be available for download later this afternoon. If you have any questions today, I'll be monitoring the chat box and the Q&A box in the webinar. If I don't get to your questions today, we will be in touch via email after this webinar. You'll see my contact details are now up on your screen. My email address is s.cadigan@bcimediagroup.com. Okay, let's get started. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us for our second webinar in the Achieving Sales Success in the Construction Industry series. In our last webinar, I discussed the actions you could be taking right now to improve your sales success and meetings when you can no longer meet your prospects. This week, I've invited a panel of experts from BCI Research to give you an insight into what's currently happening across Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. I want to welcome my panel. We have Michelle, our Chief Research Officer, Mary, our Research Manager from Victoria here in Australia, and we have Sarah, who is our Research Manager in Asia. Welcome, ladies, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Sophie.
As a provider of critical market intelligence and project leads for the construction community, BCI has monitored the impacts of coronavirus ever since the first cases were reported across the region. With well over 400 people in daily contact with industry stakeholders, BCI continues to be first in line to hear about the challenges the industry is facing and the innovative ways that our stakeholders adapt and turn a challenge into an opportunity. I'm going to jump straight into my questions to my panel. We'll be hearing about the Australian, New Zealand, and Asian perspectives here to give you a bit of insight into what's been happening most recently. So my first question today, I would like to ask Mary. In Australia and New Zealand, what would you say have been the most significant changes you've seen in the market so far?
Thanks, Sophie. Hello, everyone. I think the main thing, everyone working from home and going online, it's self-evident, I would think, except, of course, for those who are actually working on site. Our research contacts are reporting they're still keeping in touch with their clients, with other companies they usually work with, just that these meetings are now online, or of course by phone as well. That's client meetings, council meetings, and even site meetings. There are virtual site meetings as well prior to tenders and that kind of thing. More people are relying on online sources for not just information and communication, but general sort of inquiries. Our own BCI client inquiries have indeed spiked over the last 2 or 3 weeks. There's more social media posts from contractors and subcontractors disclosing and updating not just their planned works, but current works to the people who are following their work. There are some extensions to timeframes, but not the deferrals and I guess cancellations that we had expected. I think across the board, tender submissions and now have the closing dates have been extended. Something like if a tender was due to close, say, on the 1st of May, it's now closing the 1st of June. I guess this does give bidders more time to get prices, to make adjustments, to submit the tenders themselves, and also for suppliers to get specified for those tenders. Even approvals are taking a little longer, particularly through councils across Australia and New Zealand. I think largely, seemingly to a lot of their staff working remotely, it has caused a delay in some of those approvals coming through.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'd like to hear the perspective from our Asian market now. Sarah, looking at your market, would you say the same, or what have you observed as being the most significant changes in the market so far?
Thanks, Sophie, and hi, everyone. It's a bit similar to what Australia and New Zealand is currently experiencing. As Mary has said, the stay-home notices in the different countries has certainly disrupted the workflow of the different construction professionals in different the different stakeholders in the market. Firms have been forced to make it possible to work from home or in hybrid work arrangements like office and work, shifting arrangements. And of course, the activities that we see before that were done on a daily basis, like tenders and permit applications and development applications, have certainly been made difficult. And we see that the government agencies handling this permits and also conducting tenders are using digital platforms wherever possible. And also what we're seeing when it comes to relationships between developers and contractors, when they enter into contracts, that they're taking a lot more time evaluating tenders. The developer is, of course, making sure that every penny spent right now is well thought of. And of course, the contractor isn't really that keen on readily committing to any timeline or milestone or completion date, as there is no telling when exactly things would get back to normal. Also, what we're seeing is that the government is stepping in more and more to make sure that there is no irreversible damage dealt on the industry. It's in the form of stimulus packages. Sometimes it's a relief for contractors for contractual obligations relating to milestones and completion dates, and also exemptions for construction sites on social distancing measures. Overall, also governments are making sure that nationally significant projects are pushing through in spite of the pandemic.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. The next question I want to ask you, Mary, about our Australian and New Zealand markets is, when you have a look at the current state of the market and how it's portrayed in the media, we're seeing a lot of negative press, and in some cases we're seeing really sensationalized media coverage that would indicate that all is lost and we should be expecting the worst. Is that the sentiment you're picking up when you're speaking to stakeholders? Can you tell me a bit about what you're hearing on the ground? Are things motoring along, or are we stalling as an industry?
Thanks, Sophie. I think generally motoring along is my short answer. It does differ from state to state, and New Zealand, of course, the subtle differences there. We've had some very strong reports in a lot of areas, even before any of the stimulus package has been implemented. And it's only a small sort of time frame to compare, but we're seeing an increase in government projects for sure, entering and pushing through the pipeline. Overall, there's no real decrease in the number of development and planning and building applications to councils. In fact, some councils have reported an increase in the number of DAs that have been submitted. Casey Council in Victoria in particular. Tenders are still being called, contracts awarded, and construction commencing. I think the most common sentiment we're encountering is that while things continue to motor on, we're all wondering what will happen in the future. There's a lot of discussion and pondering about what will happen and the impact it will have. I think with only a month into the crisis, But the overwhelming observation is that people have made a lot of changes that they needed to make. They made them quickly and very sort of astutely. And now there's a kind of a business as usual approach. And I think their approach has been very practical and level-headed. It's not pessimism we're seeing. I think it's determination to make this work.
Fantastic. Sarah, I want to ask you the same question. What's the general sentiment that you're hearing from your conversation with industry stakeholders?
It's also a little bit similar to what Mary has said. Of course, the ability to start and continue work on site has been significantly hampered, but it's not in the same degree across all Asian countries. Some countries have made exceptions, when it comes to social distancing measures in favor of construction sites. Also, some governments have opted not to make it mandatory to stay at home. And it's been relatively easier to continue work in those countries like Thailand. Also, in Thailand, we see developers and contractors working together in order to provide dormitories for the workers on site so that they can continue working. In Singapore and Hong Kong as well, we see planning and building permit applications being submitted and processed almost like normal. Of course, there is a little bit of delay, like we said earlier, and it's made possible because of being able to submit online and to conduct virtual meetings. In Malaysia, they've been quite creative. They hold virtual site visits for tenders. And I think it's also important not to forget that the good chunk of planning and development of these projects takes place in the offices of architects, engineers, and other consultants. And admittedly, there was an adjustment period during the first few weeks of the lockdown because it was because the lockdowns were done quite quickly and the firms had little time to prepare. But as weeks passed, the firms were able to resume operations quite quickly, of course, remotely, and also in some cases in shifting arrangements. So yeah, it definitely continues to motor on. We've monitored tenders in portals like GBIS, and there doesn't seem to be any slowdown.
Okay,
any
great.
significant slowdown, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. For my last question, before we take a question from the audience, I'm going to throw to you, Michelle, for our Australian, New Zealand sectors of the market do you see as being most impacted by COVID-19? And can you tell me if there are any signs of which sectors will fare better than others over the next 6 months? What can we expect to see?
Thanks, Sophie, and hi, everyone. So we don't want to give you any kind of rash forecasts, but we can tell you what we've seen from our observations and what we've been hearing. And to start with, despite what we might have expected, there's been a real surge of hotel and tourism projects coming through over the past month. And that's often because operators are planning on making the most of the downtime to complete renovations, and they're also preparing to compete for travel dollars once the industry does start opening up again. But the reality is that this is a sector that's been dealt a hard and a swift blow, and the impact on construction has really just been delayed. We don't expect travel, whether domestic, international, business or tourism, to pick up in the short term. And while we see some bigger operators able to absorb the losses, it's hard to imagine significant investment in this sector over the short to mid-term. And I can't go without mentioning our biggest sector, residential. Happy to say that for now, multi-density and single-dwelling projects continue to move ahead steadily. As Mary mentioned, we continue to see applications and tenders. And I was speaking to a Sydney bank branch manager on Monday, and he told me that over the last few weeks, home loan applications have been as strong as ever. And in some areas, they're actually increasing. So essentially, despite and because of the current circumstances, we're seeing a lot of activity. And we do expect that this flurry of activity will be probably short-lived. And almost inevitably, the combination of financial impact on home buyers, constraints on construction finance, and impediments to overseas investment will impact residential construction volume over the next 6 to 12 months. All that being said, what is being echoed by economists and stimulus and governments is that construction is a critical industry. It contributes about 10% of the GDP and employs 10 to 15% of the population, and it's a proven vehicle for economic stimulus. So we expect both major and minor government projects to be rolled out or fast-tracked. In particular, we're expecting an increase in civil engineering projects, which are particularly well suited to these circumstances due to the nature of the sites being more amenable to distance between workers and less materials likely to be held up overseas or unable to be procured locally.
Thanks, Michelle. Sarah, same question. What sectors do you see in Asia as being hit the hardest, and what can we expect to see in the next few months?
It's similar to what Michelle said. Of course, the hotel sector has been hit hard, and also the retail sector. In the Asia Pacific region, travel and the hotel sector tourism is a big aspect of the economy. And of course, it has been hit hard by this crisis, but governments are very much keen on reviving this industry as soon as things go back to normal. And also we've seen that in the housing sector, there's been no significant slowdown, and any slowdown is temporary. Singapore has said, the Singapore government has said that any flats that are planned for construction will definitely continue after the lockdown is over. And in Indonesia, we also seen that the government has rolled out a housing loan subsidy program at the eve of the Jakarta lockdown. Also, in the manufacturing sector, we've seen countries like Japan rethinking their supply chain and thinking of moving some of their manufacturing into some of the Southeast Asian countries, which I think bodes well for the industrial sector in those countries. And also during this lockdown, there has been a push for the government to make sure that big infrastructure projects and power generation projects are funded and moving forward. Most governments consider the construction sector as an essential industry, and is very much eager to restart any construction work that has been halted, or to start any work that has been planned prior.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your insights. One thing I really take away from that is that it's definitely looking more positive than what the media might portray on a regular basis. I've got some questions coming through now, and I want to take one. Okay, Mary, for Australia and New Zealand, do you have any major project examples that are going ahead and have come up in the last few weeks?
There's a few around. Without sort of absolute facts and numbers in front of me, I know there is a series of the level crossing removal projects through Victoria. One in the area Werribee has just started in the last, I think, 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago it started. That's a major project, a civil project, of course. I think there have been quite a few medical projects. Inverell Hospital in New South Wales, their stage 2 just had a major main contract awarded in the last 2 or 3 weeks. There's some on-site sort of factory elements to do with the Snowy hydro system. Major contracts have been awarded there, and I think some extra stages are sort of commenced on site. A large it was a train station in Perth, I think the suburbs Bayswater. Main train station contracts has been awarded, and it's part of their large Metronet train and train line airport link upgrade development that's going on. A major contract awarded there. I think in the more commercial and sort of residential, there's an apartment project called Victoria and Vine in Collingwood in Victoria. That's just commenced in the last 2 or 3 weeks as well. So there are some areas that are flatter, but there's not as much to report from New Zealand due to their level 4 lockdown. But that should, things are changing with that. They may revert to level 3 next week, and more construction should commence. There would be more. I don't have those details in front of me, I'm sorry. But there are a few having sort of major main contracts awarded just in this last couple of weeks, and the construction commencing.
Great, thank you, Mary. Just for our audience, one way that you can keep track of all of these projects that are currently live is by subscribing to BCI Lead Manager, where you can receive up-to-date information on activity in our industry. Sarah, I want to ask the same question of you before you go. Can you give us any major project examples?
Yeah, sure. In Singapore, we have the train testing center spearheaded by LTA, which has awarded a $640 million contract to GS Engineering for design and construction. Also in Singapore, the Changi Terminal 5, which they have confirmed, which has been on tender, and they have confirmed will not be cancelled. At the very worst, it would be delayed, but definitely will push through. Also in Hong Kong, there's a major residential development in Kowloon by a big property developer, Sun Hong Kai Properties. And also residential industry in Thailand is very much still motoring on with an example like Supalai Icon, which is also on tender currently.
Okay, fantastic. One question I am getting a lot of, and I think I can answer this, is when can we expect the market to go back to normal? With everything changing so quickly and rapidly in our industry, we can't give you an answer on when things will go back to normal. But what we have been able to do is give you a bit of an insight into things being a lot more positive than we initially expected. There is activity in the construction industry, and projects are still going ahead despite the implementation of social distancing. Like you mentioned, Sarah, we're seeing in some countries in Asia that social distancing rules have been exempt on construction sites where possible to keep that industry going, because construction plays such a big part in the economy. I am getting some more questions, but what I'd like to do is I will take the opportunity to email you directly if you have asked us a question today. For now, I want to thank our research panel for joining us today. Mary, Sarah, and Michelle, thank you for your insights. You've been extremely helpful today in giving us a bit of an indication of what to expect in the coming months with regard to the COVID-19 situation. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I would like to move into the next portion of this webinar, which is talking about how these results impact our sales strategies. So my panel, I might just mute you now if that's okay, and I will proceed with the rest of the webinar.
Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.
Okay. So based on this feedback that we've received from our researchers, we can make a few market observations. In Australia and New Zealand, what we're seeing is everything's moving online: client meetings, council meetings, site meetings. We're not seeing as many major project cancellations or deferrals as we originally expected. We're seeing that specifiers have more time to focus on documentation, and we're seeing a delay. We're seeing tender submission periods being increased and approvals taking longer. Residential is moving along steadily, and we've seen an unexpected surge in hotel and tourism projects. Though this is the industry that's been hit the hardest, the impact on construction has been delayed. And lastly, we're seeing a real increase in government projects as well. In our Asian market, again, we're seeing everyone moving to working digitally. This is common across the board, and we're seeing it everywhere. The evaluation of tenders is taking longer, and developers are being cautious with how they're spending. We've got no noticeable spike in contract cancellations, but we have seen construction activity slow down. Where possible, countries are exempting social distancing on construction sites to allow for activity to continue. Tourism and retail have been impacted, but tourism plays a key aspect in the economy in Southeast Asia. So we should see this industry recover after a temporary lull. Residential is not expected to be impacted, and any delays are considered temporary. So across the board in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, construction is considered to be critical to the economy, and governments remain eager to commence work as soon as possible. So what I'd like each of you to do before we move on is keep an eye out for your market reports. It's so important for you to remain informed on construction activity in your countries, and to have access to accurate data on a weekly basis will help you do just that. What we're seeing, and this is going back to that question of when things will return to normal, is that we're seeing positive results from social distancing being enforced by governments. And we've had some pretty positive insights from my panel. We're now in a position where we should be aligning our short-term and long-term sales strategies with what's happening in the construction industry. We're now in a position, I want to go back. Being agile in today's market is critical to your success as a business. Setting and implementing short-term sales objectives will help you sustain momentum and success in the long term. In the short term, you should be considering the market activity and adjust your sales targets accordingly. Based on what our panelists have told us, our key sectors for construction activity are residential and government-led projects. Using BCI Lead Manager to acquire project information or conducting extensive research on what's happening in the industry and what projects are being prioritised will keep you informed on what projects your businesses need to target. Cutting through the noise created by the media and going with proven, reliable sources to find accurate project information for your business is critical to developing your sales strategies. You shouldn't let your short-term sales goals have a negative impact on your long-term sales objectives. Are you going to be helpful, long-term, and patient, or are you going to be transactional, short-term, and desperate? Understand your immediate needs as a business and don't compromise your long-term goals. One thing that we should be thinking about with our short-term sales strategy, something that we should be looking at immediately, are our unique selling points. You've probably found that your unique selling points have changed since COVID-19. USP is a pretty old school sales term, but you need to know yours. A unique selling point or proposition defines your company's unique position in the market. A strong, unique selling point lets you stand apart from competitors and actively focus your energy on creating things that cater to your ideal group of customers. So, do you have cost-effective options, or can you convey your value points over price? Developers, specifiers, and contractors are probably looking to conserve funds where possible. Can you submit cost-effective product options for projects? Or if your products are considered more high-end, what are your value points over price? Does this product offer good return on investment or low lifetime costs? If you're targeting an active construction project, you need to think about whether your products are manufactured locally. This is the major value point right now. If there's no delay in supply chain, keep an eye out for projects where your competitors' products have been specified and submit your equal or equivalent products. If you're expecting manufacturing delays, can you salvage an order by sourcing alternatively locally manufactured components? If you can't, you need to focus your effort on solidifying your relationships with specifiers. We do this by providing good technical support. So just yesterday, I spoke to an architect based in Australia who commented on how a particular company was able to provide really great technical support for a project in New Zealand, even though their staff has been displaced and faced the challenge of doing their job remotely. This good customer service really goes a long way, and customer service and support is a really powerful currency right now. Able to provide this, go above and beyond for your clients, because this is a fantastic, unique selling point. I mentioned this in my last webinar, but having a good digital presence is another USP that's critical to your success right now, especially if your business relies on trade shows, networking events, or product presentations. You can still network over email and the phone and webinar platforms, so your sales staff should be excellent communicators over the phone and email, and if they're not, dedicate time to training them up. I spoke about this in greater detail in my previous webinar, How to Sell When You Can't Meet Your Prospects. If you'd like a copy, you can contact me directly and I will send that through to you. The next thing you should be doing in the short term is focusing on our high engagement activities. So these are proven initiatives that build relationships and promote your expertise in the industry. Something you could be doing in order to solidify industry relationships is focusing on this in the short term. For specifiers, things like continuing professional development and technical workshops can lead to high engagement. You can offer these for free online and offer them on a regular basis. This is a value add that you could be doing as a business, and it's a high engagement activity. We host CPD sessions on Archify in Australia and New Zealand, and we've seen a dramatic increase in user activity because architects have more time to dedicate to learning while they're working from home. If you're looking to engage with contractors, we've seen that webinars have a high engagement rate, so you could be offering industry webinars for your contractors or your clients. Think about the conversations you've had with these stakeholders in the past and what kinds of questions do they ask you about your products and your services. Can you digitize any of these and hold open webinars on a regular basis? For our subcontractor market, can you offer digital product demonstration or installation tutorials? Can you hold a casual forum where they can ask questions and engage with your team? Above all, your main focus right now for your short-term sales strategy and in response to COVID-19 should be to provide your customers with excellent technical support and customer service. Don't let the disruption to your day impact your overall ability to deliver for your clients. Right now, you need to be solidifying relationships with your developers, your specifiers, your contractors, and your subcontractors. So when this is all over, you will be remembered as having provided them with the support they needed during this challenging time. This will make a really positive impact on your long-term sales strategies. So looking to the future, I want to talk about how important it is right now to ensure you have a great digital presence. This will set you up for long-term sales success. Companies are now being forced to trial working from home, and most are finding that it works. Even architects who have traditionally worked in a collaborative group office environment are seamlessly transitioning into this way of working. We'll see a rise in digital communication and staff working remotely as a result of this change. Set up your businesses with a website that's easy to use and contains extensive technical information, local contact details, and the ability to request meetings. Make sure your sales teams are comfortable communicating over the phone and email and hold engaging meetings, and they need to be able to hold engaging meetings through digital channels like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, or WebEx, or whatever your preferred platform is. There should be a real emphasis on creating better digital experiences for your prospects because this will be their first introduction to your business if they don't already have a relationship with you, and first impressions really do count. Losing project opportunities is inevitable right now. While our research panel was quite positive in saying that we're not seeing a high volume of cancellations and deferrals that we originally anticipated, they will occur over the coming months. Again, this comes back to ensuring that you're across all project updates. BCI Lead Manager subscribers can turn on project alerts to stay up to date with real-time changes to the projects you're interested in. You could also set up Google Alerts to stay across what's being said online. Remember to keep the lines of digital communication open with decision makers on projects or stakeholders you have existing relationships with, and ensure you're communicating your unique selling points that line up with your project changes. When difficulties like COVID-19 arise, new opportunities emerge. Taking the time to identify these opportunities and remaining informed on market updates will get you through this. Don't stop selling, but rather adjust your sales strategies accordingly. Humanize the sales process and provide excellent customer support. This will be remembered long after all of this is over. We're not working business as usual right now, so you need to be agile and adapt to changes as quickly as possible. The faster you do, the more success you'll have in the long term. So, that concludes our webinar for today. I have got some questions coming through, which I will answer for you now. Okay, just bear with me. How have different countries used technology to work from home in construction? It really depends on their preference. What we see is a lot of people logging into their servers at their firms or their workplaces through TeamViewer. A lot of people are using the digital meeting platforms like Zoom. I think Zoom has seen a real surge in the amount of people using their platforms. I think Zoom is probably one of the more reliable platforms to use for their digital meetings, but I think the emphasis has been business as usual as much as possible in terms of the way people work, but being smart in how we use digital platforms in order to do this. Okay, I'm just still going through your questions. Okay, I am getting some questions about this webinar being recorded. Yes, it's being recorded and you will receive a copy after we're completed today if you missed that in the beginning of our webinar. I will also send you a copy of our first webinar, How to Sell When You Can't Meet Your Prospects. If you need a copy of that, you can contact me directly. My email address is on your screen now. We've reached the end of our webinar now. If I didn't get to your questions today, we will have a look through them and answer them via email. If you have any queries, please contact me directly. My email address is s.cadigan@bcimediagroup.com. We also have local contact information available on our website, www.bcimediagroup.com. If you would like more information about BCI Lead Manager and tracking those projects through our digital platform, please get in touch with our local teams because we'd love to show you how. Thank you very much for your time today. I really want to thank my research panel again. Thank you so much, Mary, Sarah, and Michelle. Your insights have been really, really appreciated today. Our next webinar will focus on utilising your new and previous decision maker relationships. So please keep an eye out for our webinar invite and please keep reading the BCI COVID-19 market reports to stay up to date with what's happening in our industry. These are sent out to you directly and they are an accurate update on how our industry is performing. Thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon or your morning to join me. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.